So today I'm going to be talking about asthma. I chose to do the paper where you find a group of people and talk about them. And so I decided to talk about people who have asthma. And I chose this topic partially because I also have asthma. So I thought it would be an apt choice. So starting off, I want to talk about who has asthma. I used to think that it was mainly just nerdy people in movies, but it turns out that asthma is a lot more common in our community than you would think. And it's not a bad thing. It's a very normal thing. It's actually fairly common. And as we see in the next statistic, 1 in 13 people have asthma. Okay, maybe that doesn't sound like a whole ton, but say our classroom has 26 people or about 30 people. That means about 2 of them on average would have asthma. And so I used to think it was just the nerdy kids, but really it can be just anyone, and it's a lot more common than I originally thought. So it is a little more prevalent among women than men. About 9.8% of American women have asthma, and 6.1% of American men have asthma. Now, I do not understand why that is. If it's just because more of one gender go to see the doctor about it, I don't know. But it also affects children. Asthma is the leading chronic disease among children, and there's over 5 million cases of asthma in the United States among American children. So this shows that it's not only prevalent among adults, but also among youth, and it affects them all differently. So what about Utah? It's a little better and a little worse. Utah adults, the average is a little bit higher than the national average by about 2%. But then the kids have about 1.5% lower. So that shows that kids have less asthma than the national standard and adults have more. So what about among Black Americans? So Black people have more cases of asthma and asthma attacks, and Black children are 3 times more likely to have asthma than white children. So this I thought was an interesting statistic, why Black children are 3 times more likely to have asthma. So I dug a little bit to find some reasons. But before that, I saw that Black Americans are 5 times more likely to visit the emergency room due to asthma. This statistic really caught my attention because 5 times more likely to have an asthmatic emergency really plays an effect on them. So why? A couple of the social determinants of health. Generally, Black Americans have less access to healthcare. They can't pay for regular visits sometimes, and they may put off going to see the doctor until it is so severe that they would need to see an emergency doctor or a trauma specialist. Another tidbit I found, females are more likely to suffer from asthma than males. Once again, I do not have the expertise to tell you why, but I am able to tell you that it is a trend that was both in Utah and on the national scale. So if you put it all together, female Black Americans are 3 times more likely to die from asthma than their female or than male American men. So that shows that it affects Black females more. So instead of just thinking about how it can be life-threatening or about how it can cause you to have an asthma attack, how else does it affect your life? How do asthma attacks or labored breathing affect you in your everyday, day-to-day life? First thing is school. More kids have missed school or every year miss school annually than because of asthma than any other chronic disease. So that shows that it's limiting them from going to school. It's affecting their education, and it also affects them in sports and when they're out at recess. So here's a personal story. I liked to run in junior high and in high school, and we'd run the mile every Friday in gym class. And I noticed that I would be super tired by the time it was hard to breathe by the time we reached the first corner. And I wouldn't, I was like, okay, whatever. I didn't think much of it because I assumed that everyone else got as tired as I was. And I didn't want to be that kid that said, oh, I'm super tired during the mile. And because of that, I didn't say anything because I didn't want them to think I was out of shape or something. And so I just kept running and tried to keep up with everyone else, even though I really could not breathe. So my mom was the one that noticed this. One winter, I was during 8th grade, she noticed that I was having trouble breathing at home as well. And I noticed that it got harder in gym. And like we'd go outside and the cold air would just make it super hard to breathe. And I'd have to like, sometimes when I'd come home, I'd just lay down and just not move and just focus on breathing to try and catch my breath. So she noticed and took me to the ER, and they put me on a nebulizer. So this was to help open up my airways and help dilate my lungs so that I could get more air in. And the doctor told me that I had walking pneumonia and asthma and a slight cold, which all just exacerbated each other. So he gave me some inhalers. I received an albuterol inhaler like the one on the left that was a rescue inhaler to help for instant relief. Then I got one on the right, it was called a flow vent that was used for daily to help keep it open rather than instantaneous relief. So asthma really is a normal thing. It's a medical condition where the airways to your lungs close up and it's harder to catch your breath. And there are many different causes for it. There's sports induced, some of it is allergy related. Some people just have chronic asthma all the time where their airways are just more limited. So now what? What do we do with this knowledge? I think it's just important to remember that just because you have asthma doesn't mean you're a nerd. Don't be afraid to get treatment and get an inhaler and it will help because life really is easier when you can breathe and you can do what you want.